Well, hello everybody. Welcome to D4, D&D Deep Dive. This is the show where each week we take a deep dive into one, sometimes two, specific character builds for Dungeons & Dragons. We crunch numbers about them, we theorycraft about them, not so that I can tell you the right way or the best way to play a certain character, but to explore one potential option for building and playing a character with the hopes of creating something that is both really fun to play, but also powerful. So if you enjoy creating characters for D&D almost as much as you enjoy playing the actual game itself, or if you're just looking for tips or ideas on creating and playing a character that you have in mind, then welcome home. This is where you belong, and I'm really glad you're here. So thank you for being here. My name's Colby, and I'll be your host. So I complain a lot about the Warcaster feat on this channel. Now, I 100% appreciate that in most fantasy fiction, the idea of someone casting a spell often means they're making signs with their hands, right? Pulling out the eye of a newt from their component pouch. She turned me into a newt. I got better. Uttering magical words of the incantation when you cast a spell, all of those things. But because of the way that the rules in D&D 5th edition work, you are required to have at least one hand free for those somatic components and or the material components that you use in casting a spell. And I mean, on the one hand, if you want to sort of force the version of what a spellcaster has to do in order to cast a spell in your fantasy world, I'm mostly okay with that. But the thing is, 5e gives so many ways for casters to get out of that requirement, right? We're told in the rules, for example, that the hand you use for somatic components can be the same one you use for material components of a spell. So you're kind of like holding a shield in one hand, and then in the other hand, you've got your spell focus, which is the material component, but you're also somehow able to make the somatic gestures required at the same time. Or I don't know, maybe you're doing the somatic component really quick and then grabbing your focus or your component, right? I guess you've got 6 seconds. That's conceivable. But by the way, how do material component users keep the bat guano separate from the sand in their material component pouch in the first place? I'd like to know. I mean, I don't know if 6 seconds is enough time for me to find the little piece of fur that I'm gonna need for this spell. Maybe it works like a bag of holding and you just think about it and it comes magically to your hand. Anyway, the fact that you can do that then brings us to another huge way that lots of different spellcasters in 5e can get out of the you need a free hand rule. Lots of classes and subclasses are told that they can use something else as a spell focus. Sword bards can use their weapon as a spell focus. Clerics and paladins can attach a holy symbol to a shield and then use that as both a spellcasting focus and a shield. The Warlock invocation Improved Pact of the Blade lets you use the weapon for a spellcasting focus as well. It seems like everywhere you look in 5e, there are little cheats to get out of this free hand requirement. And so what bugs me about it, I guess, is that 5e seems to want to enforce the concept of the material component using sign-making spellcaster, but then gives a ton of ways to say, well, actually, okay, you don't really need to do all that stuff to cast spells. And what frustrates me about that is that, well, I love playing Gish characters who use both spells and weapons in combat. They're generally my favorite type of character to play, and as you can probably tell based on the number of Gishy characters that I've built for this channel. And often, I want those characters to either be able to have a weapon in each hand or a weapon in a shield. And using a weapon in each hand or a weapon in a shield means full hands, so if you aren't playing a particular class or subclass that gets one of those get out of free hand requirement jail free cards, then you have to pay the Warcaster tax and take the Warcaster feat so that you can cast spells with your hands full. And this is sort of compounded even further by the fact that in the current version of D&D, the highest weapon damage dealers are using either heavy weapons or a hand crossbow so that they can get the arguably overpowered Great Weapon Master or Sharpshooter feat, and heavy weapon users and hand crossbow users do already have a free hand for spellcasting, right? You need 2 hands to make attacks with a heavy weapon, yes, but there's no reason why you can't hold it in one hand and cast a spell before grabbing it in both hands again for your next attack. And hand crossbow users need a free hand to load the thing anyway, so they've got a free hand too. So it's like, builds that already have a damage advantage over their one-handed melee weapon using counterparts get an even bigger advantage if you want to cast spells too, because they don't have to waste one of their very few precious feats to get something that basically lets them do what so many other characters who want to use weapons and cast spells can already do for free anyways. It bugs me. But wait, you may be arguing, Warcaster has other great benefits to it as well. And sure, generally speaking, there's some truth there. Warcaster gives advantage on checks to maintain your concentration, and if you're not a warlock with the Eldritch Mind Invocation or an artificer with the Mind Sharpener Infusion, etc., then that's a pretty nice thing to have. It might not be worth an entire feat in and of itself, but it's good. And then, of course, there's the if you get an opportunity attack, then you can cast a spell instead feature. That, if you build for it, can actually be pretty fantastic. If you build for it. I mean, opportunity attacks don't generally come up all that often in your average combat encounter, but what if we could do something that would all but guarantee that we get an opportunity attack? What spell would we cast? What would give us the most bang for our buck from that pretty unique and potentially powerful aspect of the Warcaster feat that would make me not hate it so much? Indeed, that would make me super excited about the feat and anxious to get it so that I could bring to fruition the character concept that I'm building towards. I've got one idea, and no, it's not Booming Blade, though that could also be effective. Do you want to take a guess? Because I'm not giving any spoilers. You're just gonna have to wait and see as we dive into episode 113, the Eldritch Machine Gun, the Dissonant Blaster, the Burst of Goo. No, the Eldritch Whisperer. And a huge thanks to my good friend Randall Hampton for creating this fantastic artwork for the character concept that I sent him. Check out that beard. That's amazing. And the way that the whip looks like it's all ready to lash out and already in motion. He's a fantastic artist. If you want to follow him on social media or reach out to him to see if you can commission him to create some art for your character or party, I will put links in the description as always on how to do so. Thanks, Randall. And quickly, before we jump into the build, I wanted to read the description that the team over at dScryb has come up with for this character concept, because they are, once again, the sponsor for the video this week. An air of subtle discord surrounds the mysterious figure, as if reality itself is somehow repelled by their presence. They pull back a large hood to reveal the face of a young woman, heavily tattooed with strange, otherworldly iconography and tentacles which slither across her skin as if alive. A static crackle surrounds you as her slender hands are wreathed in lightning, and her wild eyes fall upon her enemy with unhinged glee. Shrieking with abandon, she directs the lances of energy with pinpoint accuracy, boiling organs and searing flesh with horrifying ease. As her foes close in, the warlock lashes out with a long, barbed whip, shaped like a tentacle and covered in vicious, dripping slime. She mutters in a low, dissonant whisper, her words so foul and alien that no mortal mind could comprehend them, and smiles as her enemies flee in terror. Man, I love the work that dScryb does just as much as I love Randall's artwork every week. So yes, for those of you who don't know, dScryb is a fantastic tool that players and DMs alike can use to get professionally written descriptions of almost anything you can imagine wanting a description for in a D&D game. Settings, characters, attacks, dialogue, spells, magic items, etc. And if it hasn't already been written, you can request that they create something for you with the right subscription level anyway. But even with a free account, you can get access to thousands and thousands of searchable descriptions in their massive library that grows every single day. Speaking of which, to celebrate October and Halloween, they've especially been adding lately a ton of extra spooky descriptions, like a brain in a jar or a dark masquerade ball, to make your Halloween one-shot that much better. And of course, they now provide so much more than just box text-like descriptions, including their most recent edition of these really fantastic 16th century style wood carvings, several of which are also available as prints. And these are a result of a partnership that they've entered into with Zin the Monsterologist. These are so gruesome, and they seriously look like they're taken straight out of a 500-year-old manuscript, right? I'm seriously considering getting a wood carving of the prodigious purple worm myself. Anyway, I quickly wanted to tell you guys about the contest they're doing for the month of October because they're giving tons of stuff away. Check it out. To enter, you simply go to the contest link that I'm putting in the video description and then just join them on Discord or visit or follow them on social media, etc. At the end of the month, they're going to give one lucky winner Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, Curse of Strahd revamped, 4 of the prints of those 16th century style wood carvings that I just showed you, and you get to choose which 4, 2 year-long player subscriptions to dScryb, and 1 year-long hero subscription, which gives you access to basically everything. I think I'm going to go enter that contest myself because I want all of that stuff. So if you want to check out dScryb without entering the contest, please be sure to go to dScryb.com/D4, also in the video description. That's how they know I sent you. If you do decide to purchase a subscription, be sure to use the promo code D4 at checkout and you'll save 10%. So huge thanks to dScryb. Love you guys, and let's jump into the build. At level 1, for our starting class, yes, if you couldn't tell by the title of the episode, we are going to be building a warlock today. And I should probably note that due to their limited spell slots, though they do refresh on a short rest, our warlock is going to be a burst damage or nova damage focused character, built with the intent to expend as many resources as they possibly can in order to get one glorious round of combat that does insanely high damage to a single target, with the hopes of taking that enemy out of the fight early on and thus giving a nice numbers advantage to your party for the rest of the combat encounter. As for our starting race, there are 2 feats that I really want for this build to get the very most out of our Nova round, and as you guys know, I really like my characters to be strong throughout their career and as early as possible. And so, yes, we're going to be taking Variant Human today, actually. I don't plan on taking any half feats, so for that reason, I think Variant Human with their 2+1s to an ability score is better than a single +2 to an ability score that you get from Custom Lineage. So yes, I'm going Variant Human. As for the free feat that we get by being a Variant Human at level 1, I mean, I said I was building around the Warcaster feat in the preamble, so yeah, getting Warcaster right at level 1 feels like a really big deal. I've kind of already gone over what Warcaster does in the preamble, so if you can't remember, and you're one of those people who always skips the preamble every single week, then you should be ashamed of yourself. Just kidding. But yes, we can now cast spells with somatic and material components even with our hands full. We get advantage on our concentration checks, which is nice since we don't have Constitution saving throw proficiency. And then, yes, can cast a spell instead of make a weapon attack when we get to make an opportunity attack. The fine print there says that the spell has to have a casting time of 1 action and can target only 1 creature. Okay, no problem. As for our abilities, I'm assuming that we're going the point buy route as always and recommend taking a 15 charisma and then one of our +1s there, a 15 constitution and our other +1 there, and then a 14 dexterity. Dexterity is for armor class and initiative purposes as well as multi-classing shortly, and saving throws, of course. As for our equipment, these first couple of levels were pretty much just going to be kind of your standard warlock, especially early on here. So I would just say, take the usual stuff. Even the standard equipment's fine. Light armor, a weapon if you want it, though I plan on using cantrips, spell focus, etc. And so, as a warlock at level 1, we get our otherworldly patron, our warlock subclass. And I'm wondering if you can guess what we're going with today. Anybody? If you said the Great Old One, then you are correct. I've never done a Great Old One warlock before, and I'm really excited to be doing so today. So let's read what Wizards of the Coast has to say about them. Your patron is a mysterious entity whose nature is utterly foreign to the fabric of reality. It might come from the far realm, the space beyond reality, or it could be one of the elder gods known only in legends. Its motives are incomprehensible to mortals, and its knowledge so immense and ancient that even the greatest libraries pale in comparison to the vast secrets it holds. The Great Old One might be unaware of your existence or entirely indifferent to you, but the secrets you have learned allow you to draw your magic from it. Entities of this type include Gaundar, called That Which Lurks, Tharizdun, the Chained God, Dendar, the Night Serpent, Zargon, the Returner, Great Cthulhu, and other unfathomable beings. Okay, so I'm going to admit, I'm not as much of a Forgotten Realms lore buff as I wish I were, and I used to think, whenever I thought about the Great Old One patron, that it was basically an Illithid-inspired subclass. In fact, when I did my Mind Flayer build a few weeks ago, that was an Aberrant Mind Sorcerer mixed with a Fathomless Warlock for like a tentacle theme, many of you were like, actually, the correct answer for the Warlock subclass should have been the Great Old One. But it turns out that Cthulhu is only like one point of potential inspiration for the patron for the Great Old One, right? Though there is like some psionic mind control-y kind of stuff built in here too. But yeah, I looked up the rest of like all of those other gods that got mentioned, and they're all like super creepy and world-ending-esque beings. But none of the others outside of Cthulhu, so far as I can tell, have a lot to do with tentacles. Regardless, I'm keenly interested to know what your connection with this Great Old One is, and how you would build your story around it. But as a Great Old One Warlock, we get the Awakened Mind feature, which tells us that we can telepathically speak with any creature that we can see within 30 feet of us, so long as that creature speaks at least one language, doesn't have to be your own. That's pretty handy, but in kind of typical subclasses that came out of the player's handbook fashion, it's a little lackluster in power compared to a lot of other subclasses we've gotten since. That's the only feature we get. And that's probably why I haven't yet used it in a build, yeah? Feel free to have an argument about power creep in the comment section below. We also get spells, of course, as a Warlock 1, and the main reason, if I'm being honest, that I wanted to go Great Old One Warlock here was because of the expanded spell list. So yeah, we should definitely take Eldritch Blast. We're planning on using that throughout our career. It does a d10 of force damage if you hit an enemy with the ranged spell attack roll that it requires, and at higher levels, it uniquely among cantrips fires additional beams as it scales. There are also a lot of great ways to enhance it with invocations, as we'll get into shortly. But yes, every Warlock subclass gets access to some additional spells not typically available to other Warlocks, though you don't, like other classes, just automatically know them. They're just added to your potential spell list, right? For Gulocks, as I will affectionately call them, Great Old One, you get access to Tasha's Hideous Laughter, which is a nice single control spell, typically not available to Warlocks, but most importantly for me, for this build, Dissonant Whispers, which is typically only available to Bards and Aberrant Mind Sorcerers. I love this spell with all of my heart, and yes, it is central to our build. Here's how it works. You whisper a discordant melody to a target within 60 feet who can hear. If they fail a wisdom save, they take 3d6 psychic damage and then must immediately use their reaction to move as far away from you as their speed allows. They won't, unfortunately, move into obviously dangerous ground like your Cloud of Daggers spell or a pit of boiling hot magma. You can upcast it for an additional d6 of damage per spell level. In addition, I would also make sure to grab the Hex spell. Hex is a bonus action to cast, requires our concentration, and then until the spell ends, you deal an extra 1d6 of necrotic damage to the target whenever you hit it with an attack. Not just a weapon attack, any attack. So Eldritch Blast works great here. When your target dies, you can transfer the Hex to another enemy with your bonus action. So even though it eats up a lot of our bonus actions, Hex can be good in the right situation, like especially if you're making a ton of attacks against an enemy in a single turn, for example, which we will definitely be doing eventually. At level 2, we get Warlock Invocations. This is a big level for us, of course, because this means we can pick up the aforementioned buffs to Eldritch Blast. The two invocations that I would recommend getting here are 1, Agonizing Blast for sure. This lets us add our Charisma modifier to the damage of our Eldritch Blast, and is one of the reasons why this spell is considered the strongest cantrip in the game for damage purposes, and why it hurts a little bit less that we only have 2, now that we're Warlock 2, spell slots, even though they do reset on a short rest. As for our second invocation, I would consider 2. Either Repelling Blast, which lets us push a target hit by our Eldritch Blast 10 feet away from us. This can get especially powerful later as we're firing multiple beams per turn, since we could just potentially push a single enemy way out of range of combat. Remember, the range of Eldritch Blast is 120 feet, so you could just keep pushing them if you have multiple beams, right? Or we could, of course, fire lots of beams at lots of different enemies and push a bunch of them all over the place. It's both really powerful and also really fun and kind of funny. The other one I would consider, though, would be, yes, Devil's Sight. Devil's Sight lets you see in both magical and non-magical darkness, and this is actually particularly powerful if you went variant human, since you don't have dark vision. But yeah, the main reason you'd want to take Devil's Sight is because at level 3, we get second level spells, and while there are lots of great ones to consider, Misty Step, of course, for a very handy 30-foot teleport spell that you can cast as a bonus action. Hold Person can be really strong against humanoids, letting you paralyze them, though it only works on humanoids, so limited usefulness. But then, yes, we could take the Darkness spell here. Darkness can potentially be really potent in certain situations when coupled with the aforementioned Devil's Sight, but also potentially really problematic, as we've discussed many times on this channel. Admittedly, though, if you're attacking from range, like we will be, the potential downside of Darkness is significantly less. For those who don't know, the shtick here is you cast Darkness on yourself, and then it covers you in basically a 30-foot bubble of darkness. If you have the Devil's Sight invocation, you can see in that darkness, but your enemies most of the time cannot, unless they have some sort of special sense that allows them to do so, and thus your attacks against them would have advantage, and their attacks against you would have disadvantage. Trying to use this tactic as a melee character means your enemies and often your allies will be in the darkness too, and that's obnoxious and challenging. But if you're attacking from range, depending on the terrain, the size of the room, you might be able to position yourself so that you're the only one in that darkness, and then it's not so bad. When I do damage reports and I'm crunching numbers for this build here, I will assume that we have access to Darkness and Devil's Sight, and I will indicate at which point you will be better off foregoing Hex for your concentration and instead using Darkness in order to give yourself advantage on those attacks. But you might want to just avoid it altogether, and if so, that's fine. We also do here at Warlock 3 get a Pact boon, and while I admittedly don't feel super strongly about which boon I'd take, I think on this character I probably go for Pact of the Tome. It's not something that I've used all that often, so for those who don't know, Pact of the Tome gives you a lot of potential utility, and eventually even support functionality. Ultimately, it just kind of makes us a more well-rounded spellcaster, and that feels like the right approach for me for this build. Feel free to go with, Pact of the Talisman or Pact of the Chain if you prefer. But Pact of the Tome tells us that we get a Book of Shadows from our patron, and it contains 3 cantrips of our choosing from any class's spell list. That's really pretty nice, meaning that we can pick up Guidance, for example, to give an extra d4 to us or any ally on a skill check, or Friends, or Mage Hand, or Mending, or Vicious Mockery, or any other number of useful cantrips. I'd probably stay away from damage cantrips here and just focus on utility and support options personally, since nothing you take is really going to be as good as Eldritch Blast, but pick your favorites. And then at level 4, we get our first ability score increase, or feat. Well, technically our second feat, I suppose, because we are taking a feat here, and it's going to be Metamagic Adept. As much as I would love to bump Charisma, this is going to be a lot more effective for our burst and Nova damage purposes. For those who don't know, Metamagic Adept lets you choose 2 metamagic options from the Sorcerer's Metamagic feature, as well as 2 sorcery points per long rest that we can spend for the metamagic options, right? 2 points per long rest kind of sucks. I really wish that they would have given us more if we're investing a whole feat here. Give me 1 metamagic option and 4 points. I don't know. But them's the rules. Now, before going any further, some of you may be wondering, if we're going to be taking Metamagic Adept, why not just take Sorcerer levels instead? That way you could get sorcery points and Metamagic and save that feat to bump your Charisma. I will admit I strongly considered doing just that. In fact, if I were playing this character in game, I just might. There are 3 main reasons why I decided not to. 1, I've never done a goo lock before, and I've had lots of requests to do one, so I wanted to commit to the subclass and not just make it a Warlock dip. You might really want to play a Great Old One Warlock, because the concept sounds fun and you want to build a great character around it. If that's the case, this is how I would do it. 2, there are some really great things that we do get from more Warlock levels. Higher level spells like Darkness, Misty Step, Pact boons, later on more invocations, etc, etc. But maybe most importantly, 3, and this is kind of a soapbox subject for me, so thanks for your indulgence. I have a huge pet peeve of people doing builds for D&D and being like, look at this character build at level 20, it's amazing. When I see stuff like that, my response, and I'm sure many of yours, tends to be along the lines of, that's great, but from levels 5 to 10, where most of us are actually playing the game, this build kind of sucks. Or at the very least, we want to know how powerful it may or may not be at those levels that we're probably going to be playing it. And that was kind of the inspiration for me starting this channel in the first place, right? So I think it's super important when considering how to create a character to try to make them as strong as possible as early as possible. And going Warlock to 4 and taking Metamagic Adept and then multi-classing into a different class is going to give us the best Nova damage possible when we hit level 6. And that's kind of a big deal to me. Not just because I'm a slave to the spreadsheets, but because I truly want to make a character as strong as I can as early as I can. Sure, if I were to just start this character in a campaign like at level 10 or whatever, I might just take 2 levels of Warlock and then some Sorcerer levels and a 3rd class too. But I'm just assuming we're starting at level 1, and so I'm trying to make them as strong as I can, as early as I can. As for the meta magic options that I would choose with the Metamagic Adept feat, I'm going to go with Quicken Spell, of course, and then whatever other option tickles your fancy. Subtle Spell would probably be my choice, but do what you want. Quicken Spell is appealing because it lets you cast a spell as a bonus action that normally takes an action to cast, right? And so yes, we now have a Nova round option. We could Quicken Spell, cast Eldritch Blast, and then with our action, cast Eldritch Blast. And we can do that because the rules state when you cast a spell with your bonus action, doesn't matter what the spell is, any spell, when you cast it with a bonus action, the only other spell you can cast on your turn is a cantrip with a casting time of 1 action. So we're following the rules. But at level 5, as I've been hinting, we are going to take a multi-class dip. Some of you probably have a guess as to what that might be. I want to take some fighter levels. Almost any time that you're building a character for Nova or burst damage in D&D 5e, you're going to get a lot of mileage out of 2 levels of fighter. I would have loved to start fighter actually for the Constitution saving throw proficiency, among other things, but both of the feats that we took required that you be able to cast spells first, and so starting fighter at 1 and then getting the free feat for variant human would not have allowed us to take either Warcaster or Eldritch Adept. So we had to start with Warlock. That's okay. Now, at this point in our character's career, something is compelling us to improve our martial prowess. I think it might be like a family heirloom that has been passed down to us in the form of a weapon, despite the fact that we are not a Hexblade Warlock. This weapon happens to be a whip. And yeah, I think this is the 3rd build that I've done now that has a whip as an important aspect of how the build works. The other 2 being the Whippoorwill and the recent Praying Mantis Thri-kreen build. To me, this whip might be kind of tentacular in appearance. Maybe it was gifted to one of your ancestors by Cthulhu itself, or maybe even taken from the great Cthulhu as a trophy when a mighty hero in your past faced them in combat and escaped with their life barely and a single tentacle. I don't know. Whatever your reasons, yes, we're taking fighter levels now, and at fighter 1 we get proficiency with martial weapons and medium armor. That's great. We can now grab the best medium armor you can afford and put it on, and proficiency with shields too, so between medium armor, your +2 to dexterity, and a shield, your armor class just went way up. And then yeah, grab yourself a whip if you didn't start your character with one, because it's going to be important to us, as we'll get into in a minute. Also, as a fighter at level 1, we get Second Wind, which tells us that once per short rest, we can, with a bonus action, heal ourselves for D10 plus our fighter levels. That's nice. And then we also get a fighting style. I'd probably recommend just going with the defense fighting style here. That gives us a +1 to our AC if we have a shield or armor equipped. But at level 6, we would be a fighter 2, and yes, that means we get Action Surge. It is amazingly powerful and gives us, once per short rest, 2 actions on our turn instead of 1. And this extra action can be used for basically anything that an action can typically be used for. And so, at level 6, it's time for our first damage report, and I need to explain how I envision combat working during our Nova round here. First of all, round 1 is going to be a bit of a setup round. We're going to be casting Hex and then making a couple of Eldritch Blast attacks against our enemy. But then round 2, we're going Nova. First, we would cast Eldritch Blast, and then we would Action Surge and cast Eldritch Blast again. Keep in mind that when we hit level 5, Eldritch Blast started doing 2 beams per casting, right? So that's 4 Eldritch Blast beams that we're firing that add our Charisma modifier just with Action Surge. But then we would use Quicken Spell and cast Dissonant Whispers. Assuming that your enemy fails their saving throw, they would run away from you and thus trigger an opportunity attack. But since we have Warcaster, it would allow us to instead cast a spell at them again, and thus another Eldritch Blast. That would mean 6 beams of Eldritch Blast all in one turn, plus the damage that we get from Dissonant Whispers. Hang on a minute, you may be saying. If we're casting a ranged spell at them as they're leaving our melee attack range, wouldn't we be casting that spell with disadvantage, since they would technically only be 5 feet away from us? I would reply. I was hoping you would ask that question. Because you see, that is the beauty of the whip. Because the whip has reach, meaning a 10-foot attack area, as everyone knows, and attack areas are used to having people not trust them, as you are not trusted by me, so I can clearly not choose the wine in front of you. Truly, you have a dizzying intellect. Wait till I get going! Where was I? Attack areas. I'm sorry, I can't stop. Okay, right, so the beauty here about the whip, an attack of opportunity doesn't trigger until the enemy leaves your reach, right? And since our reach is 10 feet, with a whip equipped, the attack won't be triggered until right before they leave our 10-foot reach, meaning we can make our Eldritch Blast attack with our reaction without worrying about having disadvantage, and that is gorgeous. Hang on a minute, you may also be saying. Dissonant Whispers wouldn't trigger an opportunity attack because it's forcing the enemy to move, and forced enemy movement doesn't trigger opportunity attacks. For you, skeptics, I have prepared this special tweet by Jeremy Crawford himself, who indicates otherwise. Hopefully your DM agrees with his ruling. Hang on a minute, you may also be saying. No, I would reply. No more hanging on. We must move on because I've already gone too long on this tangent. So yes, on our Nova round, we're moving up to within 10 feet of our enemy. Eldritch Blast, Action Surge, Eldritch Blast. Quicken Spell, Dissonant Whispers. As they run away, reaction, Eldritch Blast one more time. Assuming we have Hex on our target, all told we would be doing 4d6 from Dissonant Whispers, plus 6d10 plus 18 from our Eldritch Blasts, plus 6d6 more from Hex, since it would apply to each and every beam. On the other hand, you might be casting Darkness so that you can get advantage on all of your attacks instead, and that would also be a great tactic. Just make sure that if you can, move up, make your attacks, then they run away from you, and then if you have any movement speed left over, try and position yourself in such a way that you're not interrupting your companions too much with your darkness bubble, right? But assuming all of that, against an enemy with a 10 armor class and plus 0 to their wisdom saves, you would do 75 damage on average during your Nova round, and against an enemy with a 15 armor class and a plus 5, you would do 56 damage, though you would be using darkness as opposed to Hex for your concentration at an enemy AC of 15 or higher, so it's a pretty low AC at which advantage becomes more valuable than an extra d6 of damage. Anyway, that's a lot of damage, and it puts us comfortably in the middle of tier 1 compared to other burst damage builds that I've done to date at this level. And for those who don't know, check the video description and you'll see links to graphs and spreadsheets. Now, if there's somebody in your party who's just giving you advantage anyway via Fairy Fire or something like that, and you can use Hex and get advantage, then you're gonna go nuclear. Granted, you can only do this level of Nova damage once per long rest, since we only have the 2 sorcery points for Quicken Spell, right? But when you really need it, it's gonna be awesome to be able to pump out 6 Eldritch Beams plus Dissonant Whispers all in a single round. You are an Eldritch machine gun. But even if you don't have the sorcery points, at least once per short rest, you can get 4 beams off, right? Thanks to Action Surge. And that's still pretty hefty damage for this level, coupled with Hex. Let's see how far we can push it from here. At level 7, we're gonna be going back to Warlock for a while. Here will be a Warlock 5, and that means we get 3rd level spells. Of course, there are a ton of amazing options here. Fear, Hypnotic Pattern, Counterspell, Dispel Magic, Fly. But as far as damage is concerned, the one that I'm going to focus on is the beloved Spirit Shroud. With Spirit Shroud, your attacks do an extra d8 of damage, a minor upgrade from Hex for now, but it has the nice additional benefit that you don't have to keep using a bonus action to transfer it to another target once your initial target dies. The spell is sort of focused on you, and you just keep blasting away at whoever. You also get to choose the damage type from Cold, Radiant, or Necrotic, and dealing this damage prevents them from regaining hit points until your next turn. Finally, any creature of your choice that starts their turn within 10 feet of you when you have the spell active has their move speed reduced by 10 feet. So that's a nice little slew of benefits here. One little downside though, you only do the damage on attacks against enemies who are within 10 feet of you. Now that's not too bad, since we were wanting to be within 10 feet of our enemy anyway when we cast Dissonant Whispers, right, for them to then move out of our whip range so that we can hit them with another round of Eldritch Blast. But it does mean that you couldn't push an enemy with Repelling Blast like a billion feet away from you with each successive Eldritch Blast beam, right? And just continue to pile on that extra Spirit Shroud damage. Still, going forward, I'm going to assume that we're using this instead of Hex at lower enemy armor classes anyway. Oh, one more very important thing. Unlike Hex, this spell scales an extra d8 of damage for every 2 levels that you upcast it. So it's not going to be until 5th level spell slots, but still, that's really nice. We also do get our 3rd Warlock Eldritch Invocation here, and there are just way too many good ones to choose from, frankly. If you took Devil's Sight last time, then I'd for sure get Repelling Blast here. But if you didn't, the options become a little more muddled. Lance of Lethargy slows one enemy per turn that you hit with Eldritch Blast by 10 feet. And that's really nice if they're running away from you thanks to Dissonant Whispers, and you're pushing them away, and then they're slowed as well. You might have an enemy out of combat for multiple rounds, if you didn't just straight up kill them on your Nova round, I guess. But I also really love some options that are available to us as a Pact of the Tome Warlock. Book of Ancient Secrets lets us learn 2 first-level ritual spells from any class's spell list and write them in the book and then cast them as rituals only, which can be really nice, getting us Find Familiar, for example, Detect Magic, etc. You can also now cast Warlock spells as rituals if they have the Ritual tab, which we couldn't do before, and that seems a little odd to me, actually. Like, of any spellcaster in 5e, seems like the Warlock would be the most, like, ritualistic. Pentagrams, candles on the floor, summoning demons and stuff. Yeah, anyway. You can also learn additional ritual spells you find on your adventures with some time and gold writing them into the book, right? So if you found a scroll of Phantom Steed or something like that, you could then inscribe it into your book and cast it as a ritual. That's awesome. Alternatively, you could go with the Far Scribe invocation, which lets you cast the sending spell to any creature whose name you write in the book with their permission. And that's some pretty fantastic utility as well. Anyway, pick your favorite here, but those would be my top choices. At level 8, we would be a Warlock 6, and we get Entropic Ward as a great old one, Warlock. And yeah, this is kind of one of those features that makes you go, those players' handbook subclasses really kind of suck, right? I mean, it's not that bad. Once per short rest, you can use your reaction to impose disadvantage on an enemy attack against you, and if they miss, then you have advantage on your next attack against them as well. Okay, Genie Warlocks get free flight. I think I'd rather have flight, but hey, I'll take disadvantage and advantage. Okay, sure. At level 9, we would be a Warlock 7, and we get our 4th Eldritch Invocation. And I would just take one of the ones that I recommended before that I didn't take last time. But if you did take Devil's Sight before, you might want to consider dropping it here for something else, because we also get 4th level spells now, and there are some amazing options here. Banishment is one of the best single target control spells in game, I think. Dimension Door is a massive range teleport that even allows you to bring a friend. Gulocks get access appropriately, I think, to Everard's Black Tentacles, and that is both a great area control spell and is super on point thematically. But then there is the very important Shadow of Moil, which is kind of like Darkness, but on steroids. When you cast it, takes your concentration, makes you heavily obscured to others, meaning they can't see you without a special kind of vision or sense. And so yeah, it functions mechanically very similarly to using Darkness with Devil's Sight, but without the potential disruption for the rest of your team that Darkness can potentially cause. What's more, with Shadow of Moil, you have resistance to radiant damage, and if an attacker within 10 feet of you hits you with an attack, they take 2d8 necrotic damage for their trouble. Very, very strong spell, which makes me feel a lot better about reliably getting advantage on our attacks without upsetting our allies. And it comes just in time for our level 9 damage report. Since the last time we checked, we've upgraded the D6 from Hex to a D8 from Spirit Shroud. We've upgraded Darkness to Shadow of Moil for our advantage when we need it, and picked up a lot of nice utility and defensive options as well. The damage on Dissonant Whispers has also increased to 6d6 now, since we only have 4th level spell slots, right? And thus, against an enemy with a 10 armor class and a +0 to their wisdom save, we would do 91 damage on average, and against an enemy with a 16 armor class and a +6 6 to their save, it would be 64 damage during our Nova round. And you would substitute Shadow of Moil for Spirit Shroud for our concentration purposes, not until an enemy AC of 19 and above. So yeah, we didn't scale a ton in the last 3 levels like a lot of other burst damage builds that I've done. So we're now more like middle of tier 3 compared to other Nova builds at this level. And it kind of makes this damage report like the winter of our discontent. But we are about to see some very significant increases, so hang tight. At level 10, we would be a Warlock 8, and that means another ability score increase or feat, and that means we finally get to bump our Charisma, taking it to an 18. Yeah, delaying it this long has been really painful, admittedly. But now we're adding a +1 to every single one of those Eldritch beams to hit and to damage, and increasing our spell save DC as well, and those things are all really nice. At level 11, we'd be a Warlock 9, and we get a 5th invocation, and I think I would recommend taking Gift of the Protectors here. A new page appears in our Tome of Shadows, and we can write, again, proficiency bonus number of creatures' names in it with their permission. And now, once per day, if one of them would be reduced to 0 hit points but not killed outright, they instead just drop to 1 hit point. That's awesome, but it's kind of a bummer that it only works on one of the creatures per day and not like each one of them per day or something. Still, it's handy, and there's no reason why you couldn't also write your own name, so it's both a nice defensive feature and support feature for you to bring to your party. We also get 5th level spells here, and as always, there are a ton of amazing options. I want to talk a little bit about 2. Dominate Person is uniquely available to Gulaks and is both thematically appropriate, again, I think, and also potentially really powerful, basically letting you take control of a humanoid who fails their wisdom save against the spell. But then we've got Hold Monster. Like its cousin, Hold Person, it will paralyze your enemy, but now it works on any creature who's not undead. And that means I'm a lot more comfortable assuming you'd be able to use it in almost any combat. At this point then, the question becomes, is this better than Spirit Shroud or Shadow of Moil for my concentration? If we wanted to use it reliably during our Nova round, then we would have to use Quicken Spell for this. Then cast Eldritch Blast, Action Surge, Eldritch Blast, right? Now, there's no setup round required here in this scenario, so that's great. But yeah, you're only getting off 2 rounds of Eldritch Blast. Now, if the enemy's paralyzed and you're standing within 5 feet of them, then any hits automatically crit. So that's worth it, right? Yeah. The problem is, if you're within 5 feet of them, you have disadvantage on ranged attacks. We didn't take the Crossbow Expert feat or the Gunner feat, which you could do to bypass that, but we didn't really build for it, right? Now, yes, the disadvantage by being within 5 feet is negated by the fact that you have advantage on attacks against paralyzed enemies, so you just make attacks as normal. So maybe it's still worth it? The truth is, if we're just crunching numbers in a vacuum and only calculating damage for us and nobody else, using Hold Monster here is actually worse damage than using your concentration for either Spirit Shroud or Shadow of Moil. Because yeah, if they're paralyzed, you can't force them to run away from you with Dissonant Whispers. And you know what? Even if you had taken Crossbow Expert or Gunner, it's not as much damage. The main reason is because Spirit Shroud now scales to 2d8 per hit, right? Because we're using a 5th level spell slot for it. Coupled with the fact that at level 11, you get 3 Eldritch Beams every time you cast it. So that means 9 Eldritch Beams adding 2d8 to each of them. That's 18d8 that we'd get from Spirit Shroud. And while critting is nice, the 18d8 is just going to be more damage, plus the damage we get from Dissonant Whispers. All of that said, Hold Monster, again, allows us to do our Nova damage right on round 1 without needing any setup, and of course also would give your allies advantage against the enemy, potentially auto crits if they're melee allies. So in actual gameplay, it very well could be much more powerful than Spirit Shroud. Of course, on the other hand, going Spirit Shroud is going to give all of your Eldritch Blasts that extra 2d8 of damage per hit for the entire combat encounter. Or, Shadow of Moil would give you advantage on all of your attacks for the entire combat encounter, plus the other benefits. Anyway, when I crunch the numbers, I'm not going to assume that we're using Hold Monster, but just understand its potential and be ready to pull it out when it makes sense for your party. At level 12, I'm going to take a departure from Warlock. Now, You should absolutely stay Warlock if you want to. Getting a third 5th level spell slot per short rest in a couple of levels would be amazing. And getting a 6th level spell so that you could cast Mass Suggestion once per day can potentially win a combat encounter all by itself. And again, feels super on point thematically, I think, for a Gulak. For me, though, as far as our damage is concerned, our Warlock spell slots are capped at 5th level, which means that you can't upcast Spirit Shroud or Dissonant Whispers any further. So our burst damage scaling is really not going to benefit at all by staying with Warlock. Not that damage is everything, but it's what I'm trying to maximize on this character build, yeah? What's more, the level 10 Gulak feature, Thought Shield, is par for the course, pretty dang weak. And finally, I really hate that I can currently only use Quicken Spell once per day. I do want to be able to go as big as I can on our Nova rounds as often as possible. And sure, while as is, even if we don't have sorcery points for Quicken Spell, we could at least Eldritch Blast, then Action Surge, Dissonant Whispers, and Eldritch Blast again as they run away. So that's at least 2 uses of Eldritch Blast and Dissonant Whispers on like a mini Nova round per short rest. But I really need more sorcery points if I want to go full Nova more than once a day. And so, for all of those reasons, I'm going to start taking Sorcerer levels now. And as a Sorcerer 1, we do get our Sorcerer subclass, our Sorceress Origins, and I kind of want to just say pick your favorite here. You could, of course, go Aberrant Mind, which might make the most sense thematically, but the early level features especially are a little redundant for us, so I think instead I would go Shadow Magic here, which also feels pretty appropriately thematic, I think. And I've only ever used Shadow Sorcerer one other time in the Shadow Sorcerer build that I did. And it's great. I love it. You get Eyes of the Dark, first of all, which gives us dark vision, which is nice, since now we almost definitely don't have the Devil's Sight invocation. And we learn the Darkness spell if we didn't already know it, and we can cast it with 2 sorcery points. Doing it this way lets us see through the magical darkness, so we really don't need Devil's Sight. And, you know, this could be handy if we're in a situation where we actually need a 30-foot bubble of darkness on the battlefield for whatever reason. We also get Strength of the Grave. This tells us that when damage reduces us to 0 hit points, we can make a charisma save where the DC equals 5 plus the damage you took that reduced you to 0 hit points. On a success, you instead drop to 1 hit point. Now that doesn't work if the damage was radiant or if it was a critical hit, and you can only use it once per long rest. This is kind of cool. It stacks nicely with our Gift of the Protector's invocation, right? Potentially letting you avoid death twice per long rest. The only problem is, especially at this level, that DC can get pretty dang high and might often be unattainable with enemies regularly at this level, I think, doing 20 plus damage in a single blow, right? At early levels, you'd probably find it useful all of the time. I'm not quite sure why Wizards of the Coast built a feature in here that became more worthless the more your character progressed. It's like the opposite of scaling. It just gets worse the higher level you become, right? Anyway, you also, as a Sorcerer 1, of course, get spells, and yeah, I would probably just focus on utility, defensive, and support options here, as there's really nothing that I'd want to use for damage, so Shield and Absorb Elements and Silvery Barbs all kind of feel like no-brainers to me, maybe Featherfall. Pick your favorites. At level 13, we would be a Sorcerer 2, and we get Font of Magic. This tells us that we get 1 sorcery point per level of Sorcerer, so yeah, we get 2 more sorcery points now, and thus have doubled the number of times we can use Quicken Spell in a day. That already just feels way better. We can also now create more sorcery points by exchanging our spell slots for them, or vice versa. Meaning, yeah, we could potentially use Quicken Spell even more frequently, right? But at level 13, it's time for our next damage report, and since our last check, our Charisma score has increased, the damage from Spirit Shroud has doubled, damage from Dissonant Whispers has gone up thanks to the fact that we have 5th level spell slots for it now, we're firing a 3rd Eldritch Beam per attack, and we've again picked up loads of defensive, utility, and even support options along the way. We're in a really, really great place right now. And so, against an enemy with a 10 armor class and a plus 0 to their wisdom save, we would on average do 187 damage during our Nova round. And against an enemy with a 17 armor class and a plus 7 to their save, it would be 132. And that's more than double since last check. Yikes. putting us about mid-tier 2 compared to other Nova builds I've done to date at this level. Man, we are all over the place. Tier 1, Tier 3, Tier 2. And actually, there is no enemy AC at which you would be better off using your concentration for Shadow of Moil over Spirit Shroud, thanks to the fact that, as I've mentioned, Spirit Shroud does 2d8 per hit, and we're firing potentially 9 beams in a round, right? Now, of course, you very well may decide that you don't want to be within 10 feet of your enemies for the entire combat in order to take advantage of that Spirit Shroud, or you might prefer the additional defensive benefits of being heavily obscured. And so yeah, in that case, Shadow of Moil, great option. And of course, as we've already talked about, you might decide to go hold monster instead. Know your options, choose wisely. At level 14, we would be a Sorcerer 3 and we get Meta Magic. It's pretty awesome to be able to get 2 more Meta Magic options here, giving us 4 in total. I'm just going to say pick your favorites here. I'd probably go with like Twin Spell to let you target an extra creature with a really powerful buff or debuff, though it is a pretty expensive option. Maybe Heightened Spell, also expensive, but giving an enemy disadvantage against your Dissonant Whispers when you really need it to stick would be nice to have. We also get 2nd level Sorcerer spells here, and the only one I'm going to talk about is one you might not necessarily be expecting. Scorching Ray. Scorching Ray is fairly unique among offensive spells in the same way that Eldritch Blast is unique among cantrips. When you upcast it, instead of doing more damage, you actually get to fire more rays. We tried to take advantage of this in the flamethrower build that I did quite a while ago. As a 2nd level spell, Scorching Ray fires 3 beams that do 2d6 each of fire damage, with each again requiring a separate attack roll. But if you upcast it with one of your 5th level Warlock spell slots, it would fire 6 beams, 1 spell. If you're adding 2d8 to each of those thanks to Spirit Shroud, you can see where I'm going with this, right? Now, it doesn't get to add your Charisma modifier like Eldritch Blast does, and it is using up one of your spell slots, but it's firing twice the number of beams as Eldritch Blast currently. The only problem with it is that it's not a cantrip, meaning that during our Nova round, if we're using Quicken Spell to cast Dissonant Whispers as a bonus action, the only other spells we can cast on that turn are cantrips, right? So even if we're using Action Surge, we're still limited to cantrips on our turn. So the question I would have for my DM would be this. If I use Dissonant Whispers on an enemy and it uses its reaction to run away from me, and then I use my reaction to not make an opportunity attack but cast a spell at them, thanks to Warcaster, am I using my reaction on my turn or is it someone else's turn? That is, does my turn end immediately after I cast Dissonant Whispers? Because if so, then I could cast Scorching Ray with my reaction as they run away from me, and that's a lot more damage than Eldritch Blast would do, if I've got Spirit Shroud up, especially. But if it's still technically considered my turn, then I can still only cast cantrips, even with my reaction. And the rules do state that reactions can take place on your turn or on another creature's, right? And if it's not my turn, then it's a little unclear whose turn it is. The next person to go in combat, well, they haven't gone yet. We're still using our reactions over here. So I'm gonna err on the side of conservative here and just assume that all of this is still happening on what would technically be considered our turn, and thus no Scorching Ray. But I would 100% discuss this with my DM and see if they'd let me cast Scorching Ray as a reaction. If so, you're going to do a lot more Nova damage, though you will have to use one of your Sorcerer spell slots to cast Dissonant Whispers, since we'd be using both of our Warlock spell slots, one for Spirit Shroud and one for Scorching Ray, right? Now, if you can't do this, if you can't cast Scorching Ray, just stick with the rotation that we've already established, as 3 rounds of Eldritch Blast plus Dissonant Whispers is better damage than using Quicken Spell on Scorching Ray, casting that as your bonus action, and then firing 2 rounds of Eldritch Blast with Action Surge. Plus it has the added benefit of making the enemy run away from you. At level 15, we would be a Sorcerer 4, and we get another ability score increase or feat, meaning that we can finally take our charisma score to 20 and cap it. That took way too long and is probably my least favorite thing about this build, but at least we got there eventually. At level 16, we would be a Sorcerer 5, and that means 3rd level Sorcerer spells. I'm going to say pick your favorites. Again, I would focus on taking utility and or defensive spells here mostly, I think, like Catnap, for example, which is great for giving your party a short rest in 10 minutes instead of in an hour. But finally, for us, at level 17, we would be a Sorcerer 6. Now, most importantly, at level 17, Eldritch Blast goes up to 4 beams, and that's huge. But also, as a Shadow Sorcerer, we get the Hound of Ill Omen. The Hound is really a pretty neat feature for those of us trying to do burst damage to a single enemy, especially. And especially if we're casting a spell on an enemy that requires a saving throw. With Hound of Ill Omen, you can spend 3 sorcery points as a bonus action. Ooh, that's actually a kind of a big problem for us, to summon a hound with the Direwolf stats, plus some additional benefits, and then you can sick that hound on a single target. The hound has their own initiative and can attack their target on their turn, but only their target, and happily can make opportunity attacks against that target as well. Best of all, the target has disadvantage on saving throws against any spell you cast. So yes, this will mean really nice things for us on our Nova round, but the big problem, as I mentioned, is that it's a bonus action to summon them. And we're already using our bonus action on round 1 to get Spirit Shroud going. So this means that if you don't manage to somehow get Spirit Shroud going or the Hound summoned before combat breaks out, then we wouldn't be able to do our full Nova rotation until round 3. And that just feels unjustifiable to me. Dear DMs, please allow this house rule at your table. If you want to use your action to cast a second bonus action on your turn, you can. Does anyone play with this house rule at their table, by the way? I'm really curious to know. If you have, let me know in the comments, and let me know if you've run into any sort of major balance issues with this house rule. I really don't think that it would create a lot of problems, but I could be wrong. Anyway, I'm going to assume when I crunch numbers that you have your Hound out for our Nova round, but again, I'd probably advise against trying to do that unless you could somehow get it out before combat starts, or if you were just fighting a BBEG, right, a big boss with a ton of hit points that you knew was going to survive for several rounds. So yeah, we're exploring best case scenario numbers here as always, even if this best case might be fairly rare. But yes, for our final damage report then here at level 17, since last time we checked, we've added a Hound of Ill Omen that will be getting both a regular attack and an opportunity attack against our target on our Nova round, thanks to Dissonant Whispers and running away. We've added a 4th and final beam to each of our Eldritch Blast castings, and have finally capped our Charisma score. As usual, we've also picked up a bit of utility along the way, and even some AoE potential, as well as more sorcery points and metamagic options. And so, against an enemy with a 10 armor class and a +0 to their wisdom save, we would on average do 275 damage during our Nova round, and versus an 18 armor class and a +8, it would be 205. We broke the Bicentennial barrier. And most of that damage increase is just coming from the extra beam on Eldritch Blast, and we're kind of placed now kind of in the upper half of tier 2 compared to other burst damage builds that I've done to date at this level. And that is a fantastic place to be. All right, let's break it down. Final thoughts. The tier score for this character, if you average all of the damage that they do at all of the enemy ACs that we calculate for at each of the damage reports that we report on, and just average them all together, they get a 110. And that puts them either first place in tier 3 or last place in tier 2. I'll put them in tier 3. And again, not a bad place to be. And keep in mind that at level 6, they were tier 1. And the truth is, for most people, at most tables, in most campaigns, this build would perform with the best of them for Nova damage. And you're doing it with a cantrip and a level 1 spell. And that's maybe what I love most about it. It's really fun to take a subclass from the player's handbook that most people think is a bit of an underperformer and find ways to make it work well based on something it has that's unique. In this case, access to the Dissonant Whisper spell, coupled with the Warcaster feat, which I hate. Okay, fine. I don't really hate it that much. And in fact, it's also fun to find something that I don't typically like very much about the game, as in the case of Warcaster, and find a way to make it not only worthwhile, but something that I'm actually excited about and trying to build around. At the end of the day, this is what I love most about character creation for Dungeons and Dragons. Trying to get creative around taking a suboptimal or frustrating even aspect of something in the game, whether it's a weapon or a subclass or a spell or a feat or whatever, and finding a way to make it really shine. And there are so many ways to do this. with so many little aspects of the game that it makes the options and varieties and challenges feel limitless. And when the options feel limitless, then I never get bored. So despite all of my complaints, thank you for making a fantastic game for us to all love and puzzle over. Wizards of the Coast. Sincerely, Colby. That's the build for the week. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I had a ton of fun with it. I hope you know how much I love you. I hope that you'll check out the rest of the content in the channel if you're not typically in the habit of doing so. But above all, I hope that you stay safe and that you be kind and good and happy and that I see you again really soon. So until then, take care. Bye. On your mark, get set, go. All the stars in the sky burn to black, close your eyes. All the stars in the sky say goodbye, say goodbye. We were here yesterday, now it seems so far away. We were here yesterday, I heard you say you don't know me. You know one side of the story. Oh, you don't know me. Just got back from a concert to go see the Waylon Jennys, that song that I was just singing. They're like my favorite folk bluegrass trio in the world. And they're even better live than recorded, if you can believe it. If you love like beautiful harmonies and or music that is just going to make you feel good and happy and peaceful, you ought to check them out. Well, don't even say that. Don't even say that. Where did it go? At level 1, as is often the case, if you're going to take some fighter levels in your build, it's worth considering starting fighter. We are going to start fighter. And as for the free feat, I said that I was going to be building around Warcaster, so it makes perfect sense to take it right at the very beginning. Oh no, do I need... Oh crap. No! Okay, I gotta change this. I'm gonna go 2 levels of Warlock. That was painful. Whee!